No, one of the great things about recognizing deer by lengths of their tracks is you can count whitetail, you can count bucks where you hunt. Now, most dominant buck home ranges are about a square mile in size. They might be square 1.5 miles this way and 3/4 this way, but they're about a mile of total area within there. Some of them have bigger ranges, not many. I've only known a couple of bucks in all the years I've been hunting that had home or breeding ranges twice as large as that. And but they did. They were big bucks, and one of them is on the wall. My oldest daughter got that one, and but most of them are about like this size. So that what it means is, you know, you're out there in a square mile area, roughly a square mile in size, and you're out there scouting, and gee, here's a track here, and you look at it, oh, look at here, this one is 3 3/8. That's a 2.5-year-old buck that made the track. Now, it might be different where you hunt, you know. For example, you know, I told you that a chart with hopefully measurements are found on page 172 in my 10th edition, my new edition of Whitetail Hunter's Almanac. On the following page is a set of instructions that help you to figure out what track sizes should be for bucks living in your area, like down Texas or Alabama or Tennessee or Georgia or whatever, wherever you hunt. You can go to that next page, page 173, and it'll tell you how to figure out what those track sizes should be for the deer you hunt. And then from that, if you keep that handy, you know, from that time on, you'll be able to identify bucks and other deer living in the area where you hunt. So it's always accurate, you'll always know. Okay, but it's kind of fun, you know, when we scout every year. Well, I'm going to be doing some spring scouting pretty soon, unless this crazy coronavirus has got me pinned down for a couple of months. It might not be as soon as I'd like to be out there, but as soon as I can, I'm going to head for north to my study area and do some scouting. And you know, typically, we've got with this 1 square mile we almost always start with. My son John and I scout together because we hunt in the same general area. And we'll come on and measure a track, and we always carry either a steel tape or one of our sign guides so we can instant measure. And but we've done this so much that most of the time we can say, oh, that's a track of a 2.5-year-old buck, or that's a track of a 3.5, that's a track of a big dominant breeding buck, without actually measuring, because we've done it so many years. But every now and then it's good to measure it anyway, to make sure we're still doing it well, you know, not just guessing. And but let's say we got one here, and then we're out there some more, and we come along, and here's another track now. Oh, look at this one. This one is 3 3/4, you know. He's a 3.5-year-old. Now, this is a decent buck. I mean, we're not going to forget that guy. And now, his home range, which overlaps home ranges of other bucks, you know, doe ranges don't overlap, but buck ranges do, in a square mile. And but anyway, now we got one that size here too. And then let's say we go a little further, and oh, look at here, here's one that's almost 4 inches in length, but not quite, you know, maybe a short 1/4 inch, you know, something like that. That's a big one. And oh, gee, now we know there's 3 mature bucks living in this square mile. And we go someplace else, we come along and say, oh, here's another one right here. And this one is 3.5, or maybe a little less. And gee, you know, it's different than that first one we got that was that size. And I check again, yeah, it's less, definitely less, by maybe 3/16 or so. There's 2 in this area. that size, 2, 3.5-year-old bucks, 2 big ones living in this square mile. And we might find little differences, like way over on the other side, like say here's a square mile and you found that first 2.5-year-old buck sign right here, and you get over there. Well, that age of a buck doesn't have a whole square mile he runs around. He's got this area here, and you get way over there, can't be the same one. Here's another one with 3 and 3/8 inch tracks. There's another 2.5-year-old over here. How about that? And finally you find, well, here's 4 inches. Boy, look at that. We have found 5 mature bucks in this range here while we're scouting. How about that? And that's kind of fun. And you go over there another mile, and you start all over again. And you actually count. You can figure out how many mature bucks you got in every range, or come pretty close to it. Some of them might have matching lengths, but maybe they're in distant parts of that square mile, so they have to be different ones, unless it's the dominant breeding buck. He can go anywhere. But these others don't. They kind of stay in their own areas there. Up to a half mile, some of them have lesser sized home ranges, but they're different. So that's kind of fun. You go home, so you put it out, you got it all written on paper. Holy cow, we got a lot of bucks out there this year. And we've learned all this just from track measurements. Isn't that amazing? And if you want to figure out does and yearling does and fawns in your area, you can do the same thing with that. You know, gee, this doe's got 2 fawns. Look at that. Here's 2 sets. They're only 2.5 inches long, and things like that. You can figure it out. You know, well, that's got to be a yearling doe. Look, those tracks are only 2 5/8. You know, they're 3/8 inch shorter than a mature doe's tracks. And it could only be a yearling doe. That has to be a yearling doe. So you can sit down and figure out what you got in a square mile. Be pretty close to being accurate, just by track measurements alone. You don't need to see those deer. In fact, it's almost better that you don't. Yeah, they're kind of skirting around you, you know, when you're out there scouting, trying to stay out of trouble. They don't want you to see them, especially the big bucks. I don't want you to see them. But they can hide. Man, can they hide. They can hide a whole deer season, so you swear there's no big bucks in that area. No mature bucks at all. Something's got to be done. But they can't hide their tracks. They just can't. You're gonna be able to identify those deer by nothing else, and that's fine. And in the process, if you never saw them, you never heard any snorting and bounding deer while you're out there scouting, you didn't chase them away. They're out there. They're stayed in their range. They're going to be there. It seems like we always want to be sure, because we learned in the old days when we used to hammer and saw and build permanent tree stands there back in the 1970s in our hunting area. We did alarm older bucks to abandon their range for a while, and having learned that they can be gone for 2 weeks. After it, we always make sure we're all done scouting and getting our stand sites ready at least 2 weeks early, and then we don't go back there until the opener. We don't want to screw things up again, so we stay away. They come back, they'd get used to our stands then, and make ground scrapes right next to them in a lot of cases. Well, that's not so true today, because once a big buck learns where you got to stand, you don't necessarily have to be in there. It's just all your sense there that you made when you built the thing or put it up, or you go back and forth to look at a trail cam. Well, that's as bad as actually running into them and making them run away. Well, not necessarily to abandon their range, but they're going to start to realize it's a place to stay away before you even hunt there. But anyway, but isn't that fun to be able to go out in your hunting area and be able to figure out what you got and where they are, the deer that you want, and if you want to just hunt bucks, including that 3.5-year-old or those 2, and a big dominant buck, which, you know, the odds are not as good to take that one, but you can take nice bucks every year if you want, starting with track measurements. That's important. So anyway, we like to do it in the spring because tracks are a lot easier to see them, and measure them than they are in fall when there's grass and leaves and falling leaves, and boy, tracks can be hard to find back at that time before hunting season starts. So we like to do it in the spring when they're easy to find. And they're all back in their home ranges, usually shortly after snow melt in the spring, and so we can count on them being there. And about the only deer that are going to fall prey to wolves in the interim during the summer are going to be the fawns. And so the big deer are all going to be there unless something happens to them, you know, get injured somehow, and then the wolves will get them. But isn't that fun? Now, there's more to know. You know, tracks will tell you what kind of deer made them. But it's good to know other things too, especially when you're dealing with bucks. Because they change portions of the ranges that they use so often and during the hunting season. And that's normal. It's not just because of hunting. They change, especially when does are on heat where you hunt, like they are where we hunt during our firearm hunting seasons. So it's important. And there's 3 phases, so if there's a couple 2-week periods in between those where things will be more normal, but no matter when you hunt, from early November to the end of the year, 1st of January, there's going to be a lot of changes going on. So, good to know. Another thing that tracks will tell you is what that deer was doing when he made the tracks, and even what he was thinking. That might sound kind of crazy, but say, for example, here's a walking deer, and he's just walking, you know, and here's some walking tracks. Take a look here. You see that? No, here. And typically they're on both sides of a line going down the middle of the tracks, and well on one side. And they're not very far apart, maybe 18 inches at the most. And he's walking, and the hind prints following in front prints as he goes. A walking deer is not alarmed. When you find really fresh tracks, you know, the edges are real crisp. Real, you know, boy, that looks really fresh, like it was made minutes or maybe an hour earlier, you know. And you look at, boy, those are really fresh, and he was walking. One of the things it means that he could be really close right now. He might even be watching you. And you know, any deer that sees you get real interested in the tracks, you stop and measure the tracks, and you're looking around. That deer thinks it's been selected as a prey, and that's the kind of thing that happens when a wolf or a bear selects a deer as a prey. They get real interested in those things. So you just ruined that spot for a stand site, at least for now. Man, when you're scouting, it doesn't matter. This is going to happen no matter what. But anyway. But a walking deer is unalarmed. And not only is it likely to be near right now, especially during hours when they're active, like during feeding hours in the morning and feeding hours in the evening. And they're not usually active midday unless there's a midday feeding period going on, which doesn't happen every day. But anyway, it not only means that it could be really close right now, and you know, like say if you're going out there early in the morning, you might consider the hunting right here instead of going on to where you've been. But where are you most likely to see a buck during the hunting season? Let's say during the gun hunting season later, like in November, you know, when bow hunting, say in the middle of October, things will be different. We'll talk about that another time, but let's say it's November. Where are you like to see a buck? Well, you're not going to see him when he's bedded. No. They bed in places where it's down near impossible to see them, and they aren't moving, and you could be sitting 40 yards from away all midday and not realize a huge buck is laying right over there. That's typical. I've had that happen to me quite a few times. And just recently, even, my buddy Silver had that happen several days in a row during the past hunting season. But anyway, you see them when they're up and about, moving. So where are they going to be up and about moving? Well, on trails going to feeding areas, for one. That's a pretty important one. And but the trouble with that is they got 12 or more different ways to go to that feeding area, depending on the wind direction and where they know hunters are waiting in ambush, avoid that. And, on their way to the feeding area, they got all kinds of ways to go there. And, Doran just full of trails they can use, just all over the place. So it's not good to just say, oh, there's a deer trail, I'll sit here. Your odds there are not very good at all. Where are they best? Adjacent to or near a feeding area. Here, take a look at this drawing here of trails surrounding a feeding area. You see that? Now, there's a trail that rings a feeding area. It's been a feeding area for a while. It goes all the way around. There's all these other trails coming toward the feeding area. The best place to see a big buck any time of day is in the feeding area, especially when it's with a doe in heat. But even when they aren't in heat, when they're feeding, you can see them. And they're kind of busy eating and chewing, and they aren't able to find hunters at that period with their nose, unless they're downwind of the hunter, of course. But anyway, the feeding area is the best place to hunt, and especially these trails surrounding. You don't want to be in the feeding area. And I know of one guy, at least boy, he gets pretty excited when I mention that. He likes to be right out in the middle of a hayfield in a shack. But anyway, you want to be along these trails somewhere around the edge of the feeding area. That's where you want to be. And so what you want is tracks. The thing that makes that buck vulnerable is a track of a buck walking on one of those trails or along a trail leading into the trail. Those are the places to hunt. This is where you want to be. So that's why walking tracks are so important. Now, or it could be feeding tracks. Maybe you're out there earlier before the season and you're, oh, here's a feeding, I want to see it. Most of the tracks of feeding deer will be off trail. They don't just walk on deer trails. They're off trail eating things out there. And their tracks are zigzagging every which way. But they're walking. But in that case, their hind prints are often falling outside of their front prints when they're out there feeding. So when you're walking, scouting before a hunt, you can go out there and say, well, here's a buck. Look at the size of these tracks. They're 3 3/4 or 4 inches. He's been walking out here off trail, so he's feeding, he's zigzagging. And so this is a feeding area that buck is going to be at later today, tomorrow, maybe the first weekend of the deer hunting season when they're still eating browse like they are when we start normally, but except last year because it started so late. But you could be thinking ahead like, oh boy, what I should do is find maybe 2 or 3 spots to sit here so I can always be sitting downwind or crosswind. You want to be crosswind in the afternoon and downwind in the morning when you hunt this place. So you can count on that. Gee, I found a feeding area of a big buck. And maybe lots of other deer like doe. Here's a doe and a couple of yearlings and a couple of fawns out there and pop their feeding area. When that doe's in heat, that buck is sure going to be with that doe in that feeding area. So good things to know. The walking deer or feeding deer tracks, that's unalarmed deer. This is deer doing things it normally does when you aren't out there pestering them. Then you can count on that weeks ahead of time. Or let's say out here you find all these little, I talked to you about these little ragged tips of woody stems on browse plants that whitetails like to eat in our area beginning the second week in November. Find a whole bunch of those out there. There might not be a track out there, nothing. But if there's a whole bunch of stems that look like that, you're going to be feeding out there starting the second week now. And you can count on it. Things to know. You don't even need to see tracks to decide that. You can decide that a year ahead of time. Well, anyway, so you want a buck that's walking or feeding, and you want the most important place for those tracks is adjacent or within a feeding area. Because that's the place where you're more likely to see him. Otherwise, if he's hidden all the way there and you don't know which trails he's going to use to get there, in the morning and the evening, but he's going to end up there. That's good to know. Now, let's take a look at some different tracks, like here. Here, take a look at these. Now this is a track of a bounding deer. Look at that. You see how there's two tracks out in front here like this? You know, out in front. It's kind of a C or J shaped pattern here. There's two tracks in front, and then there's two tracks down here. Now, those two tracks down there are the tracks of the front deer, and they kind of are one behind the other, and the reason they do it when the buck is really moving fast. And here's another picture. Here's a deer running. You see how he's on his hind legs now, and the front legs are coming forward. Well, when he comes to the end of a bound, the first tracks to touch the ground are the front hoofs. And he kind of keeps them in a line like that, because the next thing is going to be his hind hoofs are coming forward now, and they're going to land on the ground ahead of the front ones. And so those hoofs that hit the ground first, he's getting them out of the way, and he's kind of keeping them in a line so the hind hoofs don't run into them when they're coming forward. And so here's the two out in front, and they might be straight across or at an angle to one another like that. When those hit the ground, then his front hoofs are going way up ahead of him, and he's bounding and he's flying into the air, and they go. You know, smaller deer may only bound 15 feet, but those big bucks can go 25 feet. Fling those huge bodies 25 feet, come down. Well, that's a really high alarm deer. And sure, you found a deer based on the size of his hoof prints there, but you also learned that he's not going to be around here for a while. He's so alarmed that he's bounding like that. He's highly alarmed. He might stay away from this area the rest of the hunting season. He might be abandoning his his home range during that period, your hunting area at that time, and not show up again for 2 weeks, or he might become nocturnal, move only at night, even while breeding is in progress. But anyway, that kind of a track is no good. There is absolutely no value in that kind of a track for buck hunting. Similarly, take a look at this next one. Here's a tracks of a buck that's trotting. Look at how these tracks end up like they're all on a single line. Well, the hind hoofs are following inside the front hoofs, but great distances between the tracks. That deer is moving pretty fast. He's under control, but he's moving away as rapidly as can without attracting attention to himself, not crashing through brush. He's in control. He can stay away from it, but he's moving fast. And if he's a buck, a big buck, chances are his tail isn't even up. He'll keep it down so it doesn't say, "Oh, here I go," you know, the white tail telling you there's some kind of deer is moving away real fast, but it'll be down. But a trotting deer is a very alarmed deer as well. That's useless. Forget those. That kind of sign during the hunting season isn't going to help you at all. If you want to hear the rest of the hunting season, you're really wasting your time. Now here's another one. Look at this set of tracks here. Now these tracks are like the tracks of a bounding deer, but they're much closer together. I call that cantering. Maybe that's not the right word, but they're closer together. They're only like 8-10 feet apart now. Why would a deer be bounding with little short jumps like that? Well, because it's not sure it really needs to do that. It doesn't know that it can't figure, it doesn't realize where this danger is or what kind of danger, but something alarmed it enough to start moving away that way. It's not moving away as rapidly, and typically when a deer moves that way, these little short jumps, and we talked about this before, his tail won't be fanned out, it'll be up, but it'll be kind of wagging from side to side as it goes. And typically a deer that does that won't go far before it stops. Well, first to check to see if something is following it, pursuing it. And if it does find it, well, from that point on, it's going to be very hard to get close to. It's going to maybe abandon its range, but it's certainly going to stay well away from you and the area where they found it. But if you do things right, sometimes you can get that deer. He's not that alarmed, and I've done that. Yeah, one year I had one start off ahead of me that while I was heading to a stand site, and there it went. I could see it going. I got my gun up and looked at it. I saw antlers, but just glimpses. But it was making those little short bounding type jumps with his tail wagging, and he disappeared real quickly. But he was going in the direction I was going, and to a brush pile that I used for a stand site on the ground next to a big feeding area. I figured, well, he's going there, so I very carefully made my way there without making noise, and I was downwind. And I got to my stand site, and I was looking out there, and there were a number of deer feeding out in this feeding area. And we had a doe and a couple of fawns across there, and some more deer over this way, and I was looking at them, and I heard brush snap right down in front of me about 20 yards away. I looked, there's that buck. It was an 8-pointer. I was eating browse, you know, so it had decided that whatever bothered there wasn't serious, and so it stopped not far into the feeding area, and it was an easy shot. I dropped it there. Same thing happened a couple of years ago. My son John was heading along a trail, heading a long trip he made around this area to get to a stand site east of there, and similar thing. He saw a deer. He saw a deer ahead of him, and he saw his tail wagging like that going ahead of him. Well, he kept moving, and the trail splits there. It goes one way and goes across a little creek, goes up the bank on the other side there, and John was planning to go this way. Well, he kept going, but he could see there were tracks of a buck, and they were big, you know, bigger than a doe, and it had gone that way. Well, his brother Ken was following behind him. This was early in the morning. Ken was following behind him, planning to go across that creek to the other side to hunt. And John made a point, you know, not stepping on those deer tracks, so because he knew Ken was coming, and so he would notice those tracks, you know. And that happened. Ken saw the tracks, and the buck had crossed the creek, and there was a strip, a feeding area up a little ways from there, and Ken was moving along carefully on foot, being as quiet as he could, and then he saw something move out there in that feeding area, on the edge of it, up ahead, and he stopped then, and watched and waited, and he got his gun up and looked at it, and sure enough, nice 8-pointer was feeding there in that feeding area, and it moved in a little hole in an opening there, clear shot, and bang, and dropped in his tracks. That kind of track, these little short jumps that look like the tracks of a pounding deer, you know, the two in back and the two in front that spread out a little bit like that, two like that, and the J or C-shaped track formation can be good tracks. And so keep that in mind, that's something to know. But in each case, you know, the deer were thinking differently. The one was making the great big bounds like that. You know, he was alarmed, and boy, I want to get out of here. It's dangerous here. Where the one little short bounds, this deer wasn't sure, and he was probably kind of convinced as long as something didn't come close to him when he stopped. He was going to stop probably within 100 yards. So something didn't come along to convince him he was being trailed. He's going to be near. He's not going to be far away. So, and if he was heading toward a feeding area, he's going to be in that feeding area. Good things to know. But what a deer is thinking when you find tracks like that. Well, what a deer was doing, you know, and I mentioned earlier, those tracks tell you that too. If a deer was heading walking toward a feeding area, he's going to feed. He's feeding. That's good to know. That's where he is right now. Or if he isn't alarmed by what you do next, now or during the day, if nobody alarms him in that feeding area, or or if you manage to get there without the deer knowing it, you get it there. Like Ken, I just explained about Ken and me. But if he isn't alarmed there, there's nothing in the world that's going to change him or keep him from coming back to that spot in the evening. Later today, he's going to be there. In our country, our deer don't move in the evening till about an hour before sunset. That's usually the earliest, although I've seen some feeding as early as 2:30 in the afternoon. I've taken bucks at that time, but anyway, that's why I always get there. I always head to a place like that by 1 o'clock after lunch. But as he is alarmed, meanwhile, there's nothing in the world that's going to keep him from coming back to the same spot. If he's alarmed, he's going to go somewhere else. So that's those are important things to know. So, but anyway, we find tracks like he's walking toward the feeding area. You know what he's thinking? I'm hungry. I'm going to go eat here. That's where I'm going right now. That's good to know. You know, tracks tell you these things. But, you know, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're nowhere close to a feeding area, and you see tracks on a trail, and they're going this way, and you think, oh man, this is a good place to. But it isn't. Because though that deer might make the same trip, they won't come back on that trail. When they're going downwind, it's going to use some other trail, especially where there's heavy cover. But that doesn't mean that deer is going to use that trail when he goes back there in the evening. He might think, well, that was a good place to eat, I'm going to go back there. But, oh, the winds has changed, I'm going to go over this way. Or big bucks are that way anyway. They tend not to use the same trails twice in a row no matter what. If the wind doesn't change, they still probably won't use it unless they have no choice. Like, say, to get across this water here, I got to use this trail. Or I'm going to follow this point and to where it sticks out over this open area, maybe an old clear cut or a farmfield, and there's an island of timber over there, and that's real close to the other side. The little short area where he would be exposed, and they tend to want to use a trail where across the opening or they spend the least time being exposed. That's a good idea. I would do that if I was a deer and there were hunters in the woods. But anyway, there are certain places where they're kind of funneled into having to move in a certain area. That can be good. And so instead of being back here where they're not funneled, you know, they can use any number of trails, go to that one where they all come together and cross from one place to another. That can be good. So, and you know what the deer was thinking when he decided that. So, you know, those deer tracks tell you that, gee, that this buck was going there because he's hungry. But no matter what, he's always being careful, and so you have to think about that. But at any rate, tracks tell you that as well. Now, there's other things about tracks that you need to know. There's good tracks and bad tracks. Well, you know something about those now, but old deer tracks, you know, fresh deer tracks. Like here's a picture of a fresh deer track, and over on the right side is a picture of an old deer track. And look at the difference here. Boy, this one is fresh. Look at how sharp the edges are. You know, you look in there. This is nice and clean. It can be in the snow. It can be in mud. It can be, you know, hard ground even, sand. But those edges are nice and sharp. You can see the outer anatomy of that track really well. And look at this other one, this old track. Well, you don't see that now. It's kind of filled in a little bit. Everything is kind of blunt around the edges. That's an old track. An old track is past history, news. You know, deer walked by here, who knows how, maybe 2 weeks ago and made that track. There's no way you can think that deer is going to come back and follow that same trail or go through that same area when there's an old track like that. When it's really fresh, that's different. Especially if it's near a feeding area. Because, boy, they're going to come back to that. They're going to funnel into that feeding area. You know, all these other trails and everything, all lead to feeding areas. Really fresh is good. That's what you want. Don't pay attention to old tracks. Those are no good. Half filled in with snow or dust or mud or whatever. But you find one that's really fresh and there's water oozing into it. Boy, that was just made minutes ago. You know, that deer is really close. So, those are good things to know. You need to know that. Okay, now, there's other tracks made by deer, especially bucks, that are good tracks. You know, tracks to get you excited. One is what my young sons, when we started hunting in our new hunting area, used to call railroad tracks. And railroad tracks were made in snow by a buck dragging his hoofs from track to track. So it looked almost like ski, you know, cross-country skier went through there, but it's kind of irregular, of course. Now, railroad tracks, or tracks of a buck dragging his hoofs from track to track, is made by a buck who's under the influence of doe in heat pheromone. That buck smells a doe in pheromone. It's heading toward her. He's downwind and he's heading toward where that deer is. Well, if there's a feeding area over there, that means he's heading toward the doe that's feeding there. Now, it could be somewhere else and it's nonsense, just a trail out in the middle of the woods, that isn't necessarily good. Unless that doe beds somewhere in the area here. You know, during midday, the doe is going to be in her bedding area and the buck is going to be with her. If it's morning or evening, the buck is going to be with the doe in the feeding area. So that's where you want to be. But that's an exciting find. And boy, my sons and I have taken quite a few really nice trophy class bucks that made that kind of a trail in snow. If you see that kind of tracks and along with it are tracks of a doe here, so let's say there's 2 or 3 inch tracks there, or let's say it's 2 and 5/8, you know, a yearling doe are in estrus too during these breeding periods. You know, that's their first estrus when they're a doe. Wherever there's a yearling doe or a mature doe, and is walking, and there's his tracks, and the buck tracks are with it, and he's dragging his hoofs like that. That's a doe in heat, and he's certainly going to be with that doe where the doe feeds and where it beds during the day. So that's good to know. Those are good signs. That's good track. Now, when a buck is with a doe in heat, he doesn't always drag his hoofs from track to track. Maybe they get tired of it. Maybe that's the initial thing. They're first smelling, oh boy, there's one over there, and or he just got to her, and but you can see tracks of a doe. Say the tracks are 3 inches long, and tracks of a big buck accompany him with 4 inches long. It doesn't matter whether he's dragging his hoofs from track to track. They're walking together somewhere. That doe is in heat, and so those are good tracks. That doe is still in heat if he's with her. Now, sometimes you'll see big tracks like that seem to be with a doe, you know, the tracks of a doe, and maybe her fawn's with her, and they're together. It might simply mean that the buck came along, the doe isn't in heat, but the buck is using that doe like radar, because he wants to eat, and he's following her, checking scents along the way, like danger scent being emitted by her tarsal glands as she goes. Things like that. Or you suddenly come on the tracks and the bow turned off wherever it was walking, and the doe in the front bounded away. These are signs of telling about something dangerous up ahead here. So bucks do that all the time. So that might be the case, but even so, those are good tracks. You know, if this buck was following that doe who wasn't in heat, and the doe was feeding, maybe it's a long string of browse plants and it's feeding along the way, and the buck came along, he could have come along an hour later and is following that same course into that feeding area or toward the feeding area. That buck is up there, and these are fresh, he's up there somewhere, Okay, that's good to know. Deer tracks, where you can put a lot of them together, like say a doe with her fawn and yearling. They're with their yearling, stay with their mother all during their yearling year, although they can be apart every now and then during the fall hunting season. But they travel together all summer long, and they use certain trails, and these small herds can create a trail that's very noticeable when you're in the woods. Take this trail. You know, a lot of hunters get really excited about trails like that. So, oh boy, look at that one. This would be a good spot for a tree stand. And sure to see a big buck on that trail. Well, maybe, if the doe is in heat on that. One of the things you need to do when you, no matter what kind of trail you look at, you let the sizes of the tracks on that trail tell you whether it's worthwhile to hunt or not. Like, for example, if all you see is 3-inch tracks and, you know, 2.5 to 3-inch tracks, some of them 2 and 5-inch, you know, gee, there's 3 deer making this tracks on this trail. But there are no tracks bigger than 3 to 3.8 inches in length. Well, they're all that size. Well, that's simply a doe trail. A doe that's trailing, and their young have been using to go back and forth to a feeding area, or maybe to a watering area. And usually they water early in the dark before feeding, and in the evening after dark, so the watering area isn't always important, although sometimes it can be. But it's not a good place unless it's close to feeding. But this is a doe trail. If you look on there, and geez, there's 4 tracks in that trail, and they're fresh. Either it's with that doe who's in heat, or this is a trail it's following to get to the same place. You know, the doe and this young going ahead, like to a feeding area. That can be good tracks. I've found tracks in the woods on trails that, you know, the edges of a whitetail's hoofs are sharp. And they chew up the ground, kill the grass, pretty soon it's all bare dirt there, you know, and all clumpy looking and tracks sunk in, you know, and that's obviously a deer trail. I found tracks in the woods that had nothing but big tracks in them. Thinking of one I found, my son and I, John, found there were 2 trails. One, they crisscrossed one another. When they crossed, it was a great big ground scrape. But no other tracks, no tracks, droppings, nothing like that, anywhere around there, just that. And it was kind of confusing until it occurred to me, this is a big buck that's been run off by the dominant breeding buck of this area, and he's hanging out here now till after breeding is over. He knows, he's been at this game for a long time, but boy, he's big. He's just unlucky to live in the area where the dominant breeding buck was bigger. And you know, I got that buck, I think it was something like 8:30 opening morning. I'm walking on that one, on the trail that went left to right out there where they crossed. I was sitting about 30 yards south of where they crossed, behind a little spruce tree in deep grass, and I got them there. But when you find a trail that's got a lot of fresh tracks of a big buck, that might be kind of special. But there again, why? You have to ask yourself why. You know? Now, if it's on a trail in a doe range, there's a lot of trails here, but it's along a trail and there happens to be ground scrape there on the trail. It's a scrape trail of a big buck. And if you're bull hunting in say September, starting about the middle of September until the middle of October, if you're hunting a trail and there's big buck tracks on that trail a lot, well, it could be the tracks of a big buck walking back and forth between the feeding area where it meets a lot of other bucks during this period, where they spar and battle to determine which of them is most. But he's going back and forth between that feeding area and his bedding area. You might use that trail a lot, especially if the feeding area and the bedding area aren't far apart. But don't count on it. Now, if it's the last half of October, during the 2 weeks or so before breeding begins in November, and there's groundscapes along that, That's a heck of a place. Big buck tracks on there. Boy, he's been walking on. This buck has been renewing his ground scrapes, pawing dirt away and and urinating on his legs to carry tarsal scent down onto that bared spot. And he's been rubbing scalps in on the branch overhanging that thing, and maybe he just got done chasing some other buck away, and he's kind of furious at that time, and he just ravages that overhanging branch, and he makes it look bad, because when another buck comes along and sees it, holy cow, this buck has got a bad temper. I don't want to be. I know him. He's beating me up in there. Look what he did to those branches up there. I don't think I want to be around here. You get the heck out of there now. But anyway, that big buck is going to renew that ground scrape at least once every 24 to 48 hours until breeding begins. He's going to come back no matter what. You can't make him stay away unless you decide you got to dump doe and heat pheromone on there, or hang up doe and heat pheromone things all around your stand site, or make a mock scrape there, that kind of thing, or put up a trail cam and come back and look at that every few days, and take the car out, put a new one in. You keep building up your personal sense, your trail sense around the area, around your stand site, along the trail, or if it's unseasonably warm or it's stormy, he might not come around every 24 to 48 hours. But as long as you stay, I would say, 20 yards away from that trail and that ground scrape, and anywhere within 100 yards along that trail, and you're always sitting downwind or crosswind of that ground scrape. And if you're below 120 yards, go get any closer than that. Get up in the tree if you have to, or you can use a natural cover at ground level to hide yourself. But stay away from it. Don't louse it up by getting your trail scent all over this area. That the first time a buck comes along and smells all that, oh, I'm not coming here anymore. Or if he spots you hiding there because you didn't pay attention to wind direction getting there, things like that, you're not going to come back. Yeah, that ground scrape is dead now. You're not going to get any buck there now, no matter how good it looked to begin with. So, or if you think you're going to rattle antlers and blow on a grunt call and do all kinds of other crazy things, yeah, that just tell me there's a human over there. I'm not fooled by those sounds. So don't do anything. Stay away from that ground scrape on that trail with all those fresh buck-sized tracks on there. Stay away from it. And be downwind or crosswind where you're sitting and that kind of thing. You're going to get them. They're a good chance. That kind of tracks are really good tracks, so keep that in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, one more thing, the boss buck, the big dominant breeding buck that lives in this square mile here where you were hunting, doesn't walk all over its square mile every day. No way. When he can, he'll follow certain trails around that, checking for does and heat, or searching for bucks that dare to come back while breeding has come back, and run them off, things like that. Sometimes the wind direction is not good for him to do that because it's blowing in a direction toward where he knows a hunter is, things of that sort, or where he's found all kinds of trail scent, getting stronger and stronger, made by that hunter. That trail scent lasts 4 days, or even one. You keep building it up, it'll last a lot longer and be a lot more intense when the buck comes along. There's more and more scent there. There's a lot of reasons for it to change. And this doe is not in heat anymore. I smell one way over there, I'm going to go over there now, and I'll be there all day tomorrow. A lot of reasons why it'll change where it is. But when it's on the move, it'll only use about 10% of total area. I mentioned that, And, most trails they use are made by does, and if they happen to go through a lot of dense cover, and they're kind of tunnels through the cover, made by the does going back and forth, it's too small. He's a much bigger animal. He's got these antlers way out past his ears, and he's going to be clattering. making all kinds of racket going through that, and the antlers would be hooking on brush and stuff, and they don't like that. So, especially during hunting season, those big bucks will often travel off trail 50% of the time, even more. No trail at all, and there's these great big tracks in the snow. You wonder, how come he did that? Well, that's a careful big buck staying off of deer trails. And because they're too small, or the wind direction is wrong, or not enough cover, all kinds of reasons. But wherever it goes, it doesn't use the whole place, that whole square mile in any one day, only about 10% of it. And so, when you're hunting big bucks, always want to be in that 10%. And the only thing that tells you when you're in that 10% is those fresh buck-sized tracks. So, that's another reason why, wherever you sit, stand on it, you always want to be within easy shooting distance, well concealed, downwind or crosswind, of very fresh tracks made by a big buck. When you're doing that, you're a buck hunter. You're a hunter that's going to take a big buck every year. You'll get more of them than I do, that I've taken in the last 30 years, because probably where you hunt, there's a lot more big bucks than there are where I hunt. And you'll learn that when you start measuring tracks out there. Holy cow, there's a lot of big bucks out here. It'll surprise you. And you wonder where they all went, you know, if you're doing things wrong. But if you do things right, you start seeing those big bucks. And you know what? You're going to write emails to me telling me, "Well, that was so great what you taught me. I'm doing much better. I got my first trophy buck in 10 years by doing what doing what you advised me to do." It'll happen. I get letters like that all the time. And it's my reward for teaching people this, sharing what I've learned all these years. So, tracks. Tracks are so important. So, if you've never measured deer tracks and taken advantage of what you've learned from those tracks before, oh my, have you got some fun ahead of you. You really do. Your hunting is going to change so dramatically you won't believe it. So, well, before finishing, let me just tell you once again here. We're looking at these graphs I made many years ago. All that measuring I did in the rain, in the summer, winter, fall, spring. When you look at this graph here, there comes a point, you know, when they get up to be 2.5 years of age, when all does and bucks get to that age, their body sizes split. And the doe size stays pretty much at this level here, 140, 150 pounds. But buck sizes continue to enlarge. Some of them are twice as heavy as a doe, a much bigger animal than a doe. And of course, because they get bigger, so do their hoofs get bigger, as this graph shows. You know, when they get to certain weights, their tracks are appropriately larger. Well, the does only get up to, when they're up to 130 pounds, 140 to 150 in this area. Doe tracks never get above here, but buck tracks keep going way up here. They get older, and finally when they're 4.5, then they pretty much stay the same size for the rest of their life. They're 4.5, 5.5, 6.5. But they're always bigger too, always significantly bigger. Once you get used to doing this, you know, you'll never make a mistake. That is a doe track, or it might be a yearling buck track. If there's no fawn tracks with it, it's very likely it's a yearling buck. But that's a doe. And that great big track there, that is a buck. And if that track is, well, in northern states, if that is a forest track, that's a really big buck. And you'll never be wrong. You've never seen that buck before. But if you base your hunting on those tracks and what they tell you, you're going to see that big buck one day. There's some you don't. Some of them will become nocturnal no matter what you do. You won't see them. Some are so darn smart the buck keeping track of you. You won't see that one either. But there's a lot of them you'll see them. And when you see that track, holy cow, he's a big 10-pointer. Here he's coming, or maybe a 12-pointer. I got a 12 and a 14-pointer like that. Here he comes, and you can't believe it. Well, there he is, at last, this great big huge buck. But it works all the time. And you know, you can, all this work, all the scouting, setting up tree stands, or selecting stand sites, ground level, all these things based on where you find these fresh tracks of big bucks. But eventually, sooner or later, you're going to finally see that buck, and it'll be flabbergasting. If you've been hunting any other way all these years, when that happens, your jaw will drop. Oh, look at that. Just keep calm. So you don't goof up with your shot, or goof up by making a lot of motion when he's looking right toward you. He's going to get that every time. If you aren't well concealed, that kind of thing. But if you do everything right, boy, you're going to start seeing, and it is exciting. This is the best whitetail hunting in the world, when you can regularly see older bucks. You might have to sit longer. You might have to see a dozen does and yearling bucks before you finally see one of those bigger bucks. But it'll happen, and gee, that's fun hunting. So, and you can pat yourself in the back and put the deer on the wall, and if you want to brag, go ahead and brag, because moose hunters can't do this. They don't see big bucks, and they can't take them. This is the turning point of your life as a whitetail hunter, when you start paying attention to deer tracks and what they tell you. Okay? Well guys, before I leave, be sure to poke that subscribe button down there. Come on, be a regular subscriber. It doesn't cost you anything. All it does is you give them the information, like your I don't get it. They don't let me have it. You'll get your they'll get your email address, and by doing that, they'll warn you right away. Oh, Dr. Nordberg's got a new YouTube presentation on, and there's a lot of guys that can't wait to see that, and guys that write me notes that every day is a good day when I find a new Dr. Nordberg seminar on YouTube. So it'll just warn you for that, and it'll just take a minute to become a subscriber, and then press that thumbs up button too, would you please? I know you enjoyed this seminar, so be sure to do that. Get your book. You'll never be sorry you did. And with this darn flu thing going around, it'd be kind of a pleasant way to spend your time at home, reading this book. You're going to really love this book, and the photos and that prove what I'm talking about. And so get your book and relax and learn. And you start doing, you'll learn all about tracks in there and other deer signs as well. And you're going to learn some in future, from my future hunting seminars as well. But this is your permanent record, the one you have at home. You can look in here 2 years later, what did Dr. Nordberg say about this or that? And you'll find it in here, and you can refer back to it. Oh yeah, geez, I've been missing that. I've done this wrong. I'm glad I got the book, because now it got me back on track doing the right things. So, and you listen to me in here. Not this guy down the road, so I don't believe that stuff, and it doesn't work here in Alabama or wherever you live. You don't believe that. No, you do this stuff, and boy, are you, pretty soon those guys say, how do you keep getting those big bucks? They're going to be asking you. You must have all the big bucks in the colony in your hunting area. You're going to say things like that. You watch and see. That's kind of neat in a way, unless they start crowding you because of that. But you can get away from that kind of stuff too if you do things right. And you'll learn about that here too. So, with that, thanks again, guys, for watching, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link.
Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.